All right, everybody. Well, thanks you guys for being here. I'll go ahead and kind of get that set up. Yeah, we're grinding through some themes. Katie was good enough last night, got me a list. She said, okay, based on my notes, here's what we covered and here's what we haven't. So we'll kind of get through some more of these today. And then probably need this week and next week. If you guys are willing to keep going. After that, I want to do like live stuff with you. I want to kind of break down, show you how I break down a profile. And so this week, we'll talk through more StrengthsFinder themes. Next week, we'll hopefully wrap up the themes. And then I want to show you how I frame out, because I was even having this conversation with somebody last week, my friend Karen, and we were talking about the the way adaptability impacts consistency and the way consistent responsibility adapts adaptability. And so again, ingredients in a recipe, much like, what is it? Salt, fat, acid. What's that book, right? I mean, the cooking book. You know, yeah. So same kind of a thing, where it's the same kind of an approach with StrengthsFinder themes, where there's the acid and there's salt and there's different parts and pieces, and they kind of roll together. So, you know what? I think I'm going to kick off here with Achiever Activator, right? Because we haven't done. I've kind of touched on Achiever, but have I done kind of Activator with it? So we need to hit that. That's the one Katie kind of talked about. Sweet. Let me do this. Okay. All right. Take care of this. All right. So, again, same kind of approach as before. We talk about the essence, communication, decision making, and then we'll do a little dark side there. So, Achiever, and then Activator. These are kind of good to do together. These two are good together because they're actually they're very similar. And so many times when someone takes StrengthsFinder, you're going to hear them say things like, oh, I don't know why I didn't have responsibility. Man, I don't know why I don't have empathy. I don't know why I don't have. And so that's because we have two things. One, we apply common sense definitions to StrengthsFinder terms, meaning we have an expectation of what we think a word means, because a lot of the StrengthsFinder description words, achiever, activator, individualization, whatever, many of them are in our normal vocabulary. So people take normal vocabulary definitions and apply it here. That is not what needs to happen. Most people don't realize StrengthsFinder names are actually unique to them. Some you can tell, some are completely made up words, like individualization, like, you know, restorative as a noun. You know, it's a different thing than being restorative as an adjective. So the words are different. So one, we use common sense definitions, which sometimes helps, but many times doesn't. But here's the other. We often assess ourselves based on action only, the thing we see. And so what ends up happening is, and the thing you see, is that when people look at themes, they're saying, oh, this theme must be dominant for me because I see myself doing that. Actually, remember, StrengthsFinder themes are about thought, feeling, and behavior. And so with that being the case, feeling and behavior, what ends up happening is you can have themes that maybe the behaviors are similar, but the thought and the feeling is different. This is why it's important to understand the motivation, because when a moment makes you stick, when a moment is life-giving for you, it's not just the action, it's the thought and feeling that go with it. And so when it comes to talking about themes, you're going to have themes where the output or the behavior is similar, but the feeling could be different and the thought could be different behind it. And so be aware of that. Why am I? So when I tell people to help me figure out what their strengths are, I will say things like, don't just tell me what activities went well for you that you enjoyed. Instead, tell me why. You need to know the why you enjoyed it, because the why of an action to be part of your strengths is as important as the what of the action. And so you may have deliberative or analytical and think, well, I got time to think about it. But what exactly were you thinking about? Analytical was thinking about sources of data. Deliberative is thinking about minimizing risk. Now, it looks the same. Considering, spending time, being quiet, analyzing, what is driving it, which is why I talk about the essence, okay? So, to get on some of these, achiever, activator. When it comes to achiever, the essence of achiever is simply, so I'll do achiever, When it comes to achiever, the essence of achiever is going to be measurable action. Action. I feel like I did this one. I didn't do this one, right? I've done so many groups lately. I can't remember. Measurable action. So people with measure, the essence is measurable. So it's got to be piled up. It's got to be measured. It's got to be kind of stacked up in the course of a day. I often say achievers start every day at 0. It doesn't matter what you did the day before. When your head touches the pillow at night, all of your accomplishment from the day before is wiped away. So you start again. You start again. And so, but measurable is also important. I will often have people talk about in meetings, what's the most exhausting things you'll do? And a person with achiever will often say, having a conversation with you. Now, they don't mean me, but what achievers ultimately mean is having a meeting. Achievers don't necessarily feel like meetings are very energizing. And so people with achiever, they naturally are kind of going, doing this measured. What am I doing that can be piled up? They also like autonomy. People with achiever like autonomy. They don't mind. They like working alone. They have a really clear sense of time. And so the reality of the situation at time, when it comes to how long something takes, they understand how long things take. And so I think I've talked about achiever a couple different times. So when it comes to achiever, it's inevitable to go, what am I doing? Can I measure it? Can I pile it up? Am I getting things done, things accomplished? And so the essence is measurable action. The communication is going to also be the work. Well, here's what I need to do. So I talk to you about, I want to have this new idea. Let's try this new thing. If we're on a team and I'm like, I think we should do this initiative. I think we should start here. Achievers, sorry, it's bad network. Achievers will naturally go, do you know how much work we are doing? Achievers are naturally going to say, well, this is how much work. So when it comes to communicating, they communicate based on work. All the things that are getting involved, all the things that are happening. And so work ends up being the language they speak. So when you tell them your problems, guess how they respond? Well, here's all the things you should do. Here's the doing things. And so they kind of go to the doing piece. And so when it comes to decision making, which is our third beat on this, they focus in on work or action. I remember, and again, doing so many of these workshops, I feel like I've told stories already to me. I remember talking to my father after my grandmother died a number of years ago. I wasn't there yet. I hadn't got home yet. And so I said to my dad, who's very introverted, Greg knows my dad. I said to my dad, well, how are you feeling? Like, what are you thinking about? Like, what's going on? Like, trying to check in with him because he likes it because I can unspool his brain for him a little bit. And he says, well, my most dominant thought right now is who's going to help me set up all the tables for the reception after the funeral? Is like his brain instantly went to the work that had to be done because to do work was to care for his mother. That's how his achiever theme always comes out in the first priority is actions need to be taken to serve, to care for things. And so it's people with achiever, it's more about, can I express care and love through acts of service, work. I prioritize work and action. The dark side of achiever is going to be burnout. So burnout is a big one because every day you start at 0. And so people with achiever struggle sometimes to recharge. And in fact, the other challenge of achiever is that you will use yourself as the bar of what it takes to be hardworking. So if someone's effort doesn't look, here's the key word, doesn't look the same as yours, achievers assume they're not working as hard. Now, just so you know, achievers are not alone in this. One of the dark sides in general for us on all of our themes is we use ourselves as the measure that we measure against. And so I say, if this is what 100% of effort looks like, and I look at you and you're running beside me here, I go, well, you should have just worked harder. You should have just worked harder, because if this is what 100% looks like for me, this must only be 85% for you effort. I'm sure that I'm giving 100%. Ignore the fact that me running at 100% and Marsha running at 100% are going to be completely different images. They're going to be different. I could be running at 100. And so understanding that is that with Achiever, you will measure the performance of others. And so the dark side is, I've got to do it because no one's working as hard as me. No one's driving as hard as me. The way to manage burnout, you cannot, because not rest. It doesn't work that way. And so what you need is active distraction. Active distraction. So in the course of your day, if you're working hard on professional things, shoehorn in private things. Like stick into your day personal errands. I had one guy who would do PhD homework during lunch. And the act of feeling accomplished on a personal level and a professional level in the same 8-hour window was life-giving. Vacations are usually active vacations. If you're going to sit on a beach, back in the days when we could sit on beaches, you had to have a stack of books that you could read through so you mentally could check it off. So checklists are part of checklists are key to being able to turn something into rest. It has to be able to be measured enough that you can check it. And so action, they're really driven and they communicate around action. So when they speak, they're listening for, when you talk, they're listening for work. When it comes to decision making, what are the things we need to do first? And then relate. Some people will get to know each other before we work together on a project. They're the opposite. Work with me on the project and we'll become, okay? Activator is the cousin. When it comes to activator, it is action, but it's action to create motion. Action to create motion. That's the essence of it. So achievers like to work in general. Activators like to work on new things. Activators like to work on things that get things started. Things have to move. And so we're impatient. I say we because it's one of my dominant ones. We say things like, are we there yet? We naturally kind of go, let's move. A mistake can be corrected, but a missed opportunity is gone forever. We talk about things like you can't steer a bicycle that's not moving. So activator is going to be all about, it looks the same, the behavior is the same, work, but we prioritize and we really like things that create motion. So things that are just maintenance, that don't make it move any faster or change direction, have less interest for us. And so when we communicate, meaning listening and speaking, we think about, well, you know what, what's next? What's next? Well, you know what we need to do now? Well, if you want to be there, well, then tomorrow because what'll happen is activators, we hear something, we decide what the target is, and then we reverse engineer it. We go, okay, you want to go here? Well, then tomorrow you've got to do this. And we work backwards. And so we need to understand that when it comes to activators, if it doesn't have momentum to it, we hate being stuck. We don't like things that are a problem. One of the things you need to know about us is that we are completely okay with conflict. We like conflict. I say we, again, I'm describing it in a bubble. I have positivity, so I don't always like conflict. But one of the things that can happen is activator at its core says, conflict is educational. Let me do this. And so conflict teaches. Conflict it can be positive. And so harmony, which says if you plan well, there won't be conflict. And activator, which says it's okay, whatever works out, we'll be fine. Like you have to understand that for us, we don't find conflict negative, although we can be told it is. Communication is going to be around what's next. Decision making ends up being focused in on very similarly, it's going to be focused in on what's next as well, but it's going to prioritize things that we think we can do quick. So speed of action. Action. I'm scribbling today, really, really bad. The speed of action piece is gonna be really important, because for speed of action, what we end up, we don't just wanna do things, we wanna do things that we can get to the quickest. So we kind of dive into which ones can we start soonest? Which pieces are the fastest? That gets our attention. This is why, as I mentioned in the first couple of weeks, I think when it comes to Activator, we have things in the back seat of our car, because we put things in the front seat and then put them in the back. But if they're not close enough to our eye line, we don't touch them. Because the dark side, believe it or not, is avoidance. Is that we avoid things that aren't the closest to us. We just kind of like, it's not important yet. It's very similar to strategic in this way. Strategic will only make decisions on things that are clearly a pending, kind of about to happen priority. Activator acts on things that are also coming. You're like, that's a ways out there. So you're famous for putting things off. I'll pay the bill when I get to it. I'll start the diet on Monday. Oh, that's not yet. And so Activator, the dark side is the opposite of activation, because you're so tuned to do the imminent. When it happens, you do it well. But if it's too far out, you're like, mañana, tomorrow, it's fine, whenever. You've got to do what you got to do. And so we kind of push it off. And so the good news about Activator is that you know how to get things going. The bad news is that you can also avoid things at certain times. When it comes to Activator, for me, I also realize there's times I push things to move that don't need to move. Is that I'll push them because I'll have a client that I'm pushing to get going, and then realize that's because I myself am bored or stuck or don't want to sit where I'm sitting. Why are you pushing it to move? Are you pushing to create momentum because something needs moving, or are you so you're self-medicating? If there's a speed bump, go faster. When it comes to Activator, that's the question in general. When you're using your themes, what is driving this? Is there something externally I'm trying to help, or is it me trying to use my theme to medicate? When I demand more action with my achiever, is it because really action will help solidify the thing I'm trying to do? Or is it, I don't know who I am if I'm not acting? What's driving your choice to use the theme is the deeper question. This is always where you end up in the dark side, is that we start to just default into doing things, and then we tell ourselves a story about, oh no, it's for the best interest. But there's so many times I've pushed clients, I realize now, when it wasn't my job to push them. I was simply bored, and I thought if I can't get my own life to move, it'd be more entertaining to see theirs, if I'm honest. At the time, I just felt justified and it was fun to push them. But I have to be aware of my own themes. So, achiever, activator. Does that sound good? Any questions out there, Katie? Anybody with anything on that? Because if not, I can go on to analytical, deliberative, or whatever.
Yeah, there's been some good comments. I think we're good.
As long as we hit them, that's all good.
Yeah.
Let's do analytical and deliberative. Analytical, and I'll compare that with deliberative, just so you can get a different piece. Analytical is a thinking theme, but the essence of analytical is thinking specifically. Remember, each thinking theme is thinking with a different focus. And so this is thinking for the source of the data. Source of data. So where does it come from? Analytical ends up being a theme that says, hey, where'd the information come from? They're super skeptical. They're skeptical about most things. Skeptical. That's not even close to, anyway, you know what skeptical means, looks like. Skeptical. People with they're skeptics, like where, who says. These end up being things that drive them. And so their questions are very sharp. If you have an analytical person on your team and you say, we should do this, this is really going to improve our donor retention if you're a nonprofit, or our sales, it'll really increase our sales. Analytical says, who says? Who says that? Show me the information. Show me the numbers. And so I always say, you have to make sure you bring your footnotes. And even then, they better be from good sources, because sources end up being almost everything. And so if you have analytical on your team, just so you know, there is almost no natural default to motion. Oh yeah, let's totally do this. I believe in you. No. Analytical assumes no before they assume yes, because no is safe and it's there. And so when it comes to analytical, they are excellent at finding good data. So when they communicate, so the essence is going to be thinking about the source of data, communication. They're listening. Where did this come from? And so when I talk and I'm teaching with people that have, and I know there's analytical in the room, I have to every single time point them to the StrengthsFinder 2.0 validation report. Because if I don't, they assume I'm full of garbage. When I start quoting stats like 67% of Americans say the greatest impact on their life, other than their spouse or partner, is the direct report supervisor, and I don't tell them what book that came out of, which, by the way, is the well-being book that Gallup wrote a number of years ago called Well-Being. If I don't give them the source of the data, analytical assumes I'm making it up. That ends up being kind of their biggest focus. I'm making this up. And so I have to, their brain is listening for where to come from. When they communicate, they start from, well, here's what good sources say. So if you don't communicate with them that way, that's the other big thing. But also understand the analytical may not communicate with you unless you ask. Remember, thinking themes don't ask if they don't communicate if they're not asked. Thinking themes are thinking. They may never say anything, and they might just assume that you're full of crap, for lack of a better word, if you don't ask them. So if you want to know what's in their head and you want sound data, they are excellent at vetting your data. They are excellent at giving you ideas. But just so you know, their communication in the generic strengths description, the one that's common, that's not the customized one, analytical, it actually says their questions feel personal. They typically ask so sharp, where did this come from and why? It registers to a lot of people as, you think I'm stupid. You think I don't know what I'm talking about. You're questioning me because you're questioning me. Now realizing that analytical is questioning you that has nothing to do with you. It's more about them. Analytical asks a lot of those deep questions. And so when it comes to decision making, it's very similar. It's like trusted source. So when I'm on a team and I'm asking them to kind of partner with me, if I don't bring data or a plan that's based on a trusted source, they're less likely to get involved until they get to vet my source. They always prioritize things that are thought through, planned, and cited. You know, they need citations, to use a paper term, right? And so citations ends up being really important for analytical. So the essence is source of data. The communication is, where did this come from? And they're listening for that, and they communicate. Direct decision making, trusted source. Where's the data from? Where's the data from? And they kind of like citations. The dark side is is basically the ability to shut us down. I always say to analytical, are you asking questions because you really want to help my plan be solid? Or are you asking questions because you know you can win the data argument every time? Because they can always find a new way to ask questions, be a block. And so if it seems too exhausting or too tiring, the dark side is they can get, when you're tired, you can beat me to death on asking me questions because you're going to win every argument. You're going to know every whole data. Why are you asking? Why are you asking? Again, much like the dark side of all of our themes, why are you doing what you're doing? Are you asking questions because you want me, or are you asking questions because you feel the need to be right? This ends up being the challenge. But asking questions ends up being the dark side. I will question you to death till you give in and realize your idea is not any good. That is analytical. The good news is, on a team, they bring such depth, so clear, so sharp. And if they know how they show up on a team, it works well. But by itself, analytical can come across as, oh, this is really intense. It's a very sharp researching term. Okay. Well, so then I'm going to partner it up with deliberative. Now, deliberative technically falls in Gallup's quadrants, I believe, in executing, but I kind of dump it into a mix of executing and thinking. So deliberative, the essence is caution. Deliberative believes the world is a minefield. Okay, so there's a whole field. You're standing at the edge of a field, and they stand right here, and they go, okay, here, 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 and here are the mines. Okay, now I'm going to stand here. I'm going to map the minefield and go, okay, now this is the path through. That's the way you get through it. That's deliberative. They see it in people. They see it in relationships. They stand at the edge of the field and they go, these are all the things that could happen. And their genius is to map, here's the trick, map through the minefield. Map through the minefield. Abdullah will appreciate this. I have some friends, actually, I think you may have even met them in Kabul years ago, who lived in Afghanistan, like in the 60s. And they got married at the British embassy in Kabul. And the years later, on their 35th anniversary, they were back in Kabul and they wanted to go to the embassy, which is bombed and gone now. And actually there were mines and other explosives around. And they said, but we were determined. Well, there was a guard at the site of the old British embassy. And he was like, well, there's some dangerous spots and the building is falling in. He's like, but just step where I step and you'll be fine. And they talk about following through the falling apart building and potential ammunition and things to get there. That is a lot of like deliberative. I remember talking to them like, that's the most insane thing I've ever heard. They said, well, no, we felt safe as long as we followed the person's footsteps in front of us. This is deliberative. Deliberative maps the world and says, follow the steps behind me. I often say deliberative is a lot like the bomb squad. They have those t-shirts. I'm with the bomb squad. If I'm running, follow me. You know, that's how deliberative is, because they're about caution. They're excellent at focusing in on what action, the action is the walking, will minimize risk. So when it comes to communication, their language is always about risk. They're listening for risk. What are the potential risks in this? What could happen? What are some of the challenges? Risks. Because let's assess the risk before we take action. And so what decision-making, kind of connected to this, ends up being on which has the, you know, it's decision-making, which is gonna be about intention, or being kind of thoughtful. Things that are rushing does not work. You will hear people with deliberative say things like, poor planning on your part does not make it an emergency for me. So when you come and you say, well, starting right now, let's do this. We've got to, it's really important. They don't like urgency because it's a minefield, remember. They're going, nope, I have got to go map the minefield and then go through it. So there's no way you just go running up the middle. So rushing, they don't like to rush. So the essence is caution. The communication is on risk. They're listening for risk. They prioritize things that are intentional or thoughtful, meaning they've taken time. But the dark side ends up being that the only safe move is to do nothing. Right? Because think of it, there's no risk. And so when you start to get tired, the dark side ends up being, well, we're just gonna do nothing. In fact, I will tell, I don't know if anybody has deliberative on here, I don't think so, but maybe you do. I think, well, Justin might. When it comes to deliberative, here's how you can tell whether or not you're tired or burned out. Deliberative at its best says, hey, I'm here, let's map the minefield, and then let's map a path through. Deliberative at its worst says, I'm gonna map the minefield. Now, nobody move until I diffuse every mine. until I solve every single problem. Okay, now go. And you're like, wait a minute. That's the opposite, because it's like half a theme. You mapped the minefield, but then you were paralyzed and didn't go through it. That's like restorative, where you see the problem, but then you don't bother to solve it. A healthy version of you is when you see the problem and you do something about it. And so knowing how to work that backwards. The dark side can be, I'm not going to move because, or I find reasons to not move. So when you've got analytical, they both are very questioning. The sound of risk, when analytical is looking for the source of the data, they'll ask a lot of questions, much like deliberative asks questions. The difference is analytical wants to make sure your source is right. Deliberative wants to make sure you're being cautious. So the questioning from a deliberative and analytical is similar. They have different approaches. Analytical will gather the data and then make decisions. Deliberative gathers the data and then takes action, which is why deliberative falls more into executing domain, because it's more about action. Sound good? Anything out there, Katie?
No, you actually answered that last question about why it's an executing.
There you go. Sweet. Achiever Activator. Which two should I pull off the list here, Katie? How
about like the focus discipline? Those are kind of similar.
Let's do focus discipline. Yeah, let's do focus and discipline. Focus. Okay, the essence of focus is, not shocking, is target. What is the target they're focused in on? Also, priorities, basically. Priorities. So what exactly are you asking me to do? Focus has the ability to shut out all the noise. What focus does is it clears out all noise and says, okay, I'm going down the road. I don't care about this. I don't care about this. I'm focused in on the road. This is my target. I'm headed to this area. And so they ignore all the other things. In fact, people with focus will tell me they'll be riding in a car with their spouse, partner, friend, and they'll realize after 20 minutes their friend is talking, and they'll look over and say, oh, are you talking to me? And they're like, there's no one else in the car. And they're like, oh yeah, but they were so on the road, they're basically oblivious that the person was talking to them. Because with focus, the brain shuts off, they prioritize whatever it is they're doing. And so they clear out all the noise, they shut everything else out. Anybody remember Carrie Strug? You guys aren't old enough to remember. You guys are way too young for this. Okay, I'm old enough. Carrie Strug was a gymnast in the early 90s or whatever. But I think when they were in Atlanta is the time the US won team gold. This is way before Simone Biles. Carrie Strug's this little short, whatever, pole vault, and she's on the female team. She's doing her vault and she hurts herself and she has one more vault to go. And if she does it right, America wins team gold. Well, she actually had broken her ankle and did the vault on a broken ankle. So it's pretty amazing. But here's the deal. After the US team won gold, so she does have focus, by the way, but after the team won gold, years later, that next year, the winning teams, like the top 4 team gymnastics teams, do a tour of the major nations of the world. And Carrie was on that tour. So you'd have to go up, you do your routine that you won the Olympics with, and everybody would see it, and stadiums and blah, blah, blah. Well, she was finishing her master's in education, and her thesis was due at the same time as the end of the tour. So she was having to write her paper on the tour. When asked what StrengthsFinder themes were the ones that ended up kind of being the one that helped the most, she said, well, it was focus. Why? Because she said, what are you talking about? She's like, I wrote during our performance. There was a space between the stage and the floor, bigger than this, obviously, but she said there was a space because there's a gymnastics floor at the bottom of the arena. She said, I would go to the corner while the events are going on the floor. She's like, I would sit under there with my laptop and write. They would come out, tap me on the shoulder. I'd run out, do my vault, and go back and write. That's focus. When asked how she could handle all the noise, she would say, what noise? Because focus shuts out everything that's not a priority. So the good news is that's essence. They target and they naturally, than actually focusing on the priority. So when they communicate, it's usually, again, it's priorities, but it's often one thing at a time. Thing at a time. Okay, what's the priority? And so they are not going to talk about multiple items. They might just pick one thing. Just so you know, having communication with focus is that they listen a lot because their brain is trying to focus on the priority. Also, just when they communicate with you, here's a phrase from the States: dog with a bone. Have you ever seen a dog that has a bone? You just try to get it out of their mouth. Let it go. Focus. If they're focused on something, if their brain is hooked in to an idea or something they need, their brain goes, I cannot let go of it. It's like a dog that has a bone. The only way to get a bone out of a dog's mouth is to give them another bone. That's true for focus. Is that what happens is that you feel, man, this is the priority. It's so here in front of me. So when you communicate, it's there. Decision making, it's also on the priority. The key is to this, though, is that you may find, focus people, that too many things, everything being important, everything, you ask your boss, what's important right now? And they're like, well, everything's important. For focus, that means nothing's important. And so focus has all these options. And they're going, which tasks do I do? And they're like, well, they're all equal. They've been like a lawnmower, they've been cut off. How do I know which one is the most important? And so focus, when it comes to decision making, you can get focused on not knowing which one's the priority. And suddenly all action stops. People with focus can become focused on being unfocused. So what needs to happen is something has to change the situation to let one of them pop up. And then you go, oh, that's it. That's the one. So if you find that you're stuck right now, there's too many things to think about and none of them seem more important because it's hard to weight them right now, you pick the one that's the most important and you dive into it. You kind of pick that. Do something to change the order of priority. Because the dark side is, the dark side is the same as the bright side, which is once you hook into something, it's hard to let go. Can't let go. Be careful about the targets you give yourself. If the target is too far out and it's not a good target, I always say focus is like a bullet or an arrow in flight. Steer an arrow. No. Once it's left your bow, it's gone. It does what it does. Once focus, you can get too far. Like someone said, have you ever tried to steer a bullet? You ever seen somebody shooting and doing kind of with a target? They kind of pull it up and they're like, they take a shot. Once the bullet leaves the gun, it goes until what happens? It runs out of energy or it hits something. This is the same with focus. Once you decide that you're on it, you're going to go until you run out of energy or you crash. So pick your targets carefully. Careful on the targets. Shorter targets are key. So you can pivot. This target, ask the question, change direction. This target, ask the question, change direction. Shorter targets. So that way you can go, I can redirect. If you keep setting these far out targets for yourself, exhaustion. Because it's either going to it's going to be painful to have to change direction. That's focus. Focus, what did I say the other one we're going to do with this? Focus and discipline. Okay. Discipline. I wish I had it. Discipline, the essence of discipline is going to be order. People with discipline, they can create order. Now, people often think this means they don't like chaos. That's not what this means at all. People with discipline, they enjoy bringing order to chaos. They enjoy bringing that in together. And so what happens is that they actually like when things are, it gives them something to focus on. So they enjoy seeing it go from messy to orderly. But I have people who will say, oh, I feel so bad. I have to keep it clean because I'm with my friend right now and they're very organized. They actually don't really care What they do not like is when they are told to live in chaos, but are not empowered to bring order to it. So in work situations, you get the reputation, oh, discipline, they just can't handle it. It's so variable. So corporations will use things like, oh, the environment is so dynamic and discipline struggles with that. That's actually a lie most of the time. What it actually is they are not properly empowering discipline to order things. And so therefore they're saying, well, you're in chaos and disorder, just get used to it. Oh, it's called being flexible. Actually, it's not. But they'll leave it there and then tell them they can't handle the variability. Discipline can handle it. They just need a chance to plan for it. And so discipline is about creating order. It's systems. It's predictability. And so A plus B has to always equal C. So if you need flexibility, they build it in. So A plus B2, A plus B3, they will build it into their order. So their brain is great at creating order. When they communicate, meaning express, so comms, they express and listen, it's going to be about, here's what's interesting, the final result. Because they reverse engineer it. They start here and then go back. So the system has the checkpoints. But they need the final result to be able to give them someplace to start. So when they communicate, they ask questions. They like to go, what's happening here? What are all the variables? Because their brain is mapping the variables and putting them in order. Very similar to a ranger, but a ranger is juggling. So a ranger, this is the difference between, see, there's a huge difference between, so just to kind of drop in a ranger here, a ranger, which we've talked about, is more like a conductor. Discipline is more like a composer. The discipline is laying out all the pieces. The arranger is then interpreting that and making it work and being flexible with whatever they have. So discipline is a little different. It's more intentional. It's very specific. All the pieces go together. So when it comes to communication, listening for the final result, decision-making is going to be focused in on predictability. They will choose the thing, when given two solutions, they choose the solution that is the most predictable, that has the most consistent result, that brings order to chaos for things. So being predictable, they go, that would work. Let's do that. Let's step in with that. Oh, this makes sense to me. If it's just, let's change it for change's sake, they may say, well, why? Like, we don't know the change will have a good result. And so when it comes to decision-making, there it is. The dark side ends up being when things are outside your plan. So the dark side, you can trust your order too much. Trust order. And so what can happen is you put too much faith in your ability to be consistent. In order to really do discipline well, you obviously need to know all the variables. So when the variables change, that can be difficult. And so the dark side is you can resist change sometimes because it's more comfortable in what you know. And so I was working with Jeep Grand Cherokee, and they were talking about one of many clients. So I basically, the head of Grand Cherokee, we only made it one plant in the world in Detroit, the head of quality and actually productivity engineering, they every job on an assembly line completes every 47.6 seconds on an assembly line. And they were going to add one clip that was going to take an extra 2.5 seconds. And they couldn't figure out, just so you know, StrengthsFinder wise, based on the Toyota plants, discipline is the most common theme in high performance assembly line workers because they love the fact that the job reoccurs constantly. They actually enjoy the reoccurrence of the job. It's predictable. So when they suddenly were going to add one step, people got all angry. And I said, Well, you're just saying, well, it's not a big deal. It's only 2 seconds. But for discipline, it changes the order. So when it came to getting them on board, I had to say, show them how adding this one step will make the rest of their job smoother, more orderly, more intentional, because that gets them on board. So discipline is going to be about the plan and predictability. Focus is about the priority. Discipline's trying to pull the pieces together. Focus is trying to go, what's the target? And so they're a little bit different there. All right. Let me hit a couple more before we're done here. What else have I got? Adaptability. We kind of got through a bunch today, which is good. Adaptability and command. Actually, command and competition. That'd be good. Command and competition. Command. All right, I have command in my top 5. It's like number 2 for me. People with command. It ends up being all about who's leading. Who's leading? So we're driven by things being led well. Who is leading? And so command doesn't have to be in charge, but the super questioning of who else is. So command is like, this has got to be led in any meeting. Who's leading well? If the leader's not leading, we feel in the pit of our stomach. When it comes to day-to-day tasks and work, we might be the ones to rally the team together. But again, it's not a matter of, command doesn't have to be in charge and isn't. In fact, if we have command, like I am a really great number 2. If I trust you, man, I really trust you. I'll just give myself to that. But if I realize that suddenly you're going to maybe cause pain to others, I let it go. I'm like, wait a minute, I can't trust you. I have to defend people. I have to protect them. Anybody familiar with Enneagram? I'm a hardcore 8, right? So I'm a hardcore 8. Means that at my worst, the dark side of an 8 is going to basically we're always afraid of being abandoned. So we project that. And so much with command, very similar. You're like, oh, here we go. I'm going to dive in and kind of be able to focus in on, I got to protect people from being abandoned, protect people from being led poorly. And so command ends up being focused in on who's leading. Communication, we end up speaking really declaratively, meaning we declare stuff. We speak very confidently. I can listen to an audiobook one time, hear the points I care about, and step on stage and teach it as if I've studied the book for months. My communication and my command theme will collide, and I can speak with confidence if I'm confident in the book, with confidence on stage, as if I've studied it forever. So command leads from, it'll best serve if I can just speak directly. And so I'm listening, by the way. So communication, I speak declaratively, but I'm also listening for safety, which is interesting. I'm listening for who's keeping people safe, who's the most dependable, who's the greatest leader. So I'm listening to you talk. If you sound careless, and I'm like, oof. But Abdullah will tell you, he's seen me. I can step into different cultures, and I step in, and I'm like, I just convince myself that I can lead well. I can be present. And so it doesn't matter where I'm going, because I'm like, I do really well in places that aren't like me, because especially I put myself well in the hands of others, if I trust them, or I go, I can handle this. So dangerous situations don't scare me. So when it comes to communication, command, I'm focusing on who's leading. Communication, I speak really declaratively, but I also listen for who can keep me safe. What do I need to know to stay safe? Decision making, oh, I put a line there. Decision making, I pick the solution that feels led well. That is led, is that lead? No, lead. I pick the solution based on, let me do this one, leadership. That's my priority. Is that who does it, even if I don't understand it, even if I don't have all the variables, if I think that Brendan has the right idea, I'm going to go, you know what? I trust Brendan that even if it doesn't go well or perfect, it's okay. We can fix it. I default to being led by Brendan because I choose. So it's based on, I assess the leadership and then I pick. So even if it's a plan I don't understand, For me, when it comes to designers, even like I am like Anna's on here. Anna is my designer. Anna's from North, but lives in Costa Rica. And so when I send my email to her every week, at this point, I trust her. I don't even tell her what to do. I'm like, here's the data. Here's my email. Here's my style book. Could you create some graphics? But I trust her. So, whatever she creates, and then I just post it. I'm like, awesome. Here you go. The command decides based on leadership. If I think that it's not okay, and I didn't trust her work, over time, if suddenly she was like, oh, I just think we should start having McDonald's images in I'd be like, wait. So I would inject myself. But as I know her, I trust her leadership. Therefore, I give her authority and I'm hands off. My solution is always picked based on leadership. Communication, I'm listening for who's well. I'm speaking declaratively, but who's leading? The dark side is end up God complex. This is my own. Maybe it's different for you. The dark side of command ends up being focused in on, wow, well, I've got to know who I can help. I've got to know about leadership. I've got to know all the problems. And so you can start to isolate or not. You can get overly involved. You can start to equate your identity with leading others. And so the dark side, you'll hear it from me over and over again. I mentioned with Woo, some of us like to be read. We like to have people read our stuff more than writing it. Same thing with this. With command, man, I'll pump out content. And if I don't feel like it's impacting people's lives, I go, am I doing anything that matters? Instead of being like, Mike, just create. Mike, just do it because you like it. I will vet and judge my own work based on the ability to influence other people or not. That's the dangerous part, is that I basically put value in other people's hands. This is the challenge of influencing themes. So when I hit competition right now is that we often judge ourselves and who we are on our ability to move something externally. Think of it. So that means then maximize your competition, command, significance, not as much as self-assurance. We are suddenly putting our clarity in someone else's hands. We're going, well, did it move them? Did it not move them? How does that work? And so influencing themes, that can be a challenge. So competition in essence is not about winning. Competition is about comparison. People with competition, they compare themselves. And so I often say that, maximizer is a theme. When they were in a foot race and they crossed the finish line, they look at where they were. Where's my time? Oh, it's here. Okay, there it is. That's me. And they pick their time. But the time is compared against themselves. Did they maximize their own effort? So they don't care if they're first. They could be down here on the list and they're like, oh, I beat my own personal record, PR. Competition is interesting. Competition finishes a race. They don't look at the scoreboard. They look over their shoulder. Competition wants to know who's behind them. Who is behind me? Because they're comparing. They end up comparing to others. And so comparing ends up being everything. They compare their parenting against other people. They compare their performance. They compare how much money they're making. They compare, you'll hear them go to restaurants. And so I mentioned like Futuristic will go and have a sandwich and say, this sandwich will be great with pickles. They'll go to a restaurant and say, this is a good sandwich, but I had a better sandwich one time when I was in Pennsylvania. And you're like, wait, what? Like, I didn't ask that. And so they always compare. I was good. There is no just today was good enough. They are always better or worse than the last time they did something. Competition struggles with anything else. So it's a comparison model. Communication is again based on comparison. Well, how does that compare to someone else? And again, they don't just want to win. It's about winning in comparison to other winners. And so people think, oh, competition. Well, they know they're the best. but it's not enough. I was used to joke that my buddy Brian and I used to travel together early years ago when we did StrengthsFinder. Brian was elite triathlon, top 2% of his age bracket. In case you're wondering, I am not. And so what ends up happening is that he had competition. Well, I used to jog in the morning and he would run when we'd be traveling. We'd be in Seattle or Redmond somewhere. If he was about winning, why wouldn't he just challenge me to a race every morning? Well, what? Because to race me, there's no competition. I'm not good enough. I'm at the bracket. To beat me doesn't mean anything. So again, it's not about competition. So the competition, they're communicating in comparison to see if you can play, if you can push them. You're going to find competition, they push. They're aggressive. They put shots across the bow. They're listening because they're constantly, the other thing is they're constantly measuring, right? And so they're measuring. How are you in comparison to me? Where's those lines? And they kind of pull those pieces together. So competition's measuring. When it comes to decision making, they play games they can win. Games they can win. Okay? They know, hey, I'm into football, I'm not into basketball. And so if they look at a solution, they're like, I can't win at that game, they'll play this game. Or they won't play at all. Competition then distances themselves from anything they think they can't possibly win. And so it ends up being a really different approach. They prioritize the game or the moment. The dark side is you're only as healthy as comparison. And so the dark side is that the problem is you compare yourself to a very unhealthy, a very poor leader, you'll become more poor. You'll become unbalanced. So for competition, it's all about who are you chasing? The person you're chasing ends up being everything. Make effort to pick a good benchmark, a good person to be measured against. Ends up being extremely important. And so competition is about measurement. They decide based on winning in games they can play. Command is focused on leadership. Who's leading? Protect. Who can then kind of naturally for others. And so they're different themes, but they're both influencing themes. We are basically down to just our last few. So next we'll hit up individualization, futuristic, learner. We'll kind of wrap with that. And then adaptability. And then we'll just kind of talk about how these work together. So if that works for you guys, we'll kind of start to bring us in for a landing.
No landing. Keep vamping. Thursday mornings forever.
Thursday mornings for a while. We'll do it. Thanks you guys for showing up. It really means a lot. I know we're 5 now or 6 now. I can't remember. So thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
See you guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Really, we
in touch if you
appreciate
need
you. Such a great lens on this.
Marsha.
I learned so much every time. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcia. You're welcome.
Bye. Take care.
I
See you
agree.
guys.
I'm enjoying learning about myself and other people. So thank you.
Thanks, Jenny, for that. Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Thanks, Sean, for making it even on your call.
Thanks for adminning, Katie.
Katie's the best. I'm like, people don't get it. One of the things on Forbes this week was like, you have somebody who could play like yeah, because you can I can see chat, but I'm like, I can't see what's coming in. So I'm like, hopefully, I'm like, Katie's got this. I can tell from how she's reading. So thank you, Katie.
I'm not like an organized note-taking person in any other context, but if it's something that I'm super into, I'm into it. Like you were talking about
awesome.
Achiever. Mike, Achiever,
Yeah.
my mother and my
Yeah.
father are Achiever number 1. It's 34 for me. 34.
34.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, I don't want what they got. So good.
My measure of, achievement is a lot different than theirs. So it's so interesting.
No, but your ability to be present in it is really good. So thank you. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
day.
See you.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you,
All
Mike.
right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Brendan. Good to see you, man. Take care of yourself.
Hey, you too.
Good to see. Hi, Christina. We'll see you next week, Christina. Well, early in the weekend.
Bye,
She's on
thank
mute
you.
right now. Bye, Anna.